They called me weak. My name is Neris, and I was the Omega every wolf believed was born only to obey. Every morning, I knelt before Luna Veilora, cleaned her chambers, carried her cloak, and smiled through every insult because I thought that was all my life would ever be. The pack said I should be grateful they had given me a place to serve. They were wrong. No one knew why the moon seemed to follow me. No one understood why strange silver symbols appeared on my skin whenever I cried. And no one, not even I, knew the truth hidden inside my blood. Then, on the night everything changed, the Luna ordered me to kneel before the entire pack. She thought she was humiliating me. Instead, she awakened something that had been sleeping inside me for centuries. That was the night they stopped calling me a worthless Omega. And started fearing the power they had created. Now, let's begin. My name is Neris. If you had met me a few moons ago, you never would have believed I carried anything extraordinary inside me. I certainly didn't. I believed what everyone else believed, that I was born weak, destined to spend my life serving wolves who thought my only purpose was to lower my head whenever they passed. Looking back now, I realized something strange. The moon had been trying to reach me for years. I just didn't know how to listen. The morning my life began to change started like every other. Long before dawn painted the sky, the heavy iron bell in the center of Silver Thorn Pack echoed across the valley. Clang. 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 Its sound always dragged me from sleep before the birds had even begun to sing. I pushed aside my thin blanket and sat up on the narrow wooden cot inside the servants' quarters. The room was small enough that my fingertips almost touched the opposite wall if I stretched. Cold air slipped through cracks in the wooden boards. Winter was approaching. I wrapped my faded gray cloak around my shoulders and whispered the same words I had whispered every morning for years. Just survive today. Some mornings I believed those words. Most mornings I didn't. Outside, the village was already waking. Warriors crossed the courtyard carrying spears while cooks hurried toward the kitchens. Smoke curled into the dark sky from dozens of chimneys. The entire pack was alive. Yet no one noticed the Omegas. We moved like shadows. Invisible. I hurried into the great hall before anyone could accuse me of being late. The marble floor reflected the flickering torchlight, but muddy footprints covered nearly every stone. That meant extra work. I filled a bucket with icy water and began scrubbing. Back and forth. Back and forth. The rough brush scraped against my hands until my fingers stung. Hours seemed to pass before the hall finally shone again. Just as I straightened my aching back, a sharp voice sliced through the silence. Neris. Every muscle in my body tensed. I turned immediately. Luna Veilora stood at the top of the grand staircase, wrapped in a magnificent white cloak trimmed with silver wolf fur. Her dark hair fell perfectly over one shoulder, and the crystal moonstone around her neck sparkled with every movement. She never looked untidy. She never looked tired. She looked at me the way someone might look at dirt on their boots. My Luna, I said, lowering my eyes. My chambers. Right away. I followed her upstairs without another word. The Luna's chambers were larger than the entire servants' building. Sunlight poured through enormous windows onto polished furniture carved from ancient oak. Fresh flowers filled crystal vases. Golden candles lined the walls. Even the rugs beneath my feet were softer than my own blanket. Veilora removed her gloves and tossed them onto the floor. I bent to pick them up. You missed a stain yesterday. I'm sorry, my Luna. Sorry doesn't clean silk. No, my Luna. She walked toward the mirror while I folded her cloak carefully. You know why Omegas fail? She asked. I remained silent. She answered her own question. Because they expect kindness. She turned slowly until our eyes almost met. Kindness makes servants forget their place. I understand. No. Her voice became colder. You obey. Understanding isn't required. I bowed my head even lower. Inside, something twisted painfully in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Just exhaustion. Sometimes I wondered if she had ever smiled at anyone. As I brushed her long hair, she watched herself in the mirror. "The council arrives tomorrow," she said. "Everything must be perfect." "Yes, my Luna. If they see even one mistake." She paused. "You will wish they hadn't." She didn't need to explain. Punishment in Silverthorn Pack was rarely gentle. When I finished arranging her jewelry, she dismissed me with a wave of her hand as though I were no more important than a broom. The kitchens were even busier. Steam rose from enormous pots while servants rushed between tables carrying baskets of bread, smoked meat, and fresh fruit. The scent should have made me hungry. Instead, it reminded me that I hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon. "Don't even think about touching that." Cook Brand shoved a tray into my arms. "Take this to the warriors." "Yes, sir." By the time every table had been served, almost nothing remained. Someone handed me a single piece of stale bread. "Your breakfast." I smiled politely. "Thank you." It was hard enough to crack a tooth. Still, I ate every bite. Because hunger never cared about pride. Later that afternoon, while carrying fresh linens across the courtyard, laughter drifted toward me. Several young wolves stood near the training grounds. One pointed in my direction. "Look. The Luna's favorite servant." Another laughed. "Careful. She might trip over her own feet." A third wolf picked up a small pebble and tossed it toward me. It bounced harmlessly against my shoe. They all laughed louder. I kept walking. That was how I survived. If I answered, things became worse. If I ignored them, eventually they grew bored. At least, most of the time. I almost reached the storage hall when a familiar voice called my name. "Neris." I turned. An elderly healer named Meili stood beneath an old willow tree, carrying a basket filled with herbs. Unlike almost everyone else in the pack, she looked at me with gentle eyes. "You haven't been sleeping." I forced a smile. "I'm fine." She sighed softly. "You always say that." Because telling the truth changed nothing. Melis reached into her basket and handed me a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside were 2 warm honey cakes. My eyes widened. "For me? You've grown thinner." "I can't accept." "You can." She closed my fingers around the bundle. "And you will." For a moment, I forgot how cruel the world could be. "Thank you," I whispered. She smiled. "The moon sees more than people do, child." Those words stayed with me long after we parted. At the time, I thought she was only trying to comfort me. I had no idea she was speaking the truth. And before the sun set that very day, I would step into the ancient forest once again. This time, the forest would answer. The moment my hand left the ancient stone, I stumbled backward, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure the entire forest could hear it. What was that?" I whispered. The silver light that had covered the stone faded until it looked as old and lifeless as before. The forest became quiet again, but it wasn't the same silence. It felt as though countless unseen eyes were watching me. I turned in every direction. And no one's here. Even as I said the words, I didn't believe them. The cool evening breeze brushed against my face, carrying the sweet scent of wildflowers. Then, without warning, the wind circled around me instead of passing by. My hair lifted gently as silver leaves swirled through the air. The leaves formed a ring around my feet. For only a heartbeat. Then they scattered as though nothing had happened. I stood frozen. "I need to leave." I hurried away from the stone circle, following the narrow path toward the pack. Yet every few steps, I couldn't stop myself from looking over my shoulder. The ancient stones remained perfectly still. But deep inside me, something no longer felt asleep. As I reached the edge of the forest, I heard hurried footsteps. Neris. I turned to see Melis rushing toward me with a worried expression. "There you are," she said, breathing heavily. "I've been looking everywhere. I'm sorry. I lost track of time." Her eyes searched my face carefully. "Did you go into the old stone circle?" My stomach tightened. How did you know?" Instead of answering immediately, she gently took my hand. The instant her fingers touched my skin, she gasped. Her eyes widened. "This warmth. What is it?" She released my hand slowly. "Nothing." But I knew she wasn't telling the truth. "You've never lied to me before." She looked toward the forest before speaking quietly. "There are stories older than this pack. Stories almost everyone has forgotten." "What kind of stories?" She hesitated. "They say the moon once chose guardians who carried her light within their blood." I blinked. Guardians? They protected every wolf, no matter their rank. Alpha, Beta, Omega, it didn't matter. Before the Great Wars, power belonged to those with compassion, not pride. I listened carefully. No one has seen one for centuries. I laughed nervously. "That has nothing to do with me." Melis didn't laugh. "I hope you're right." Her words lingered in my mind all the way back to the village. Night had already fallen when we returned. The silver thorn pack looked beautiful beneath the moonlight. Lanterns glowed along every path. Music drifted from the great hall. Tomorrow's council gathering had already begun attracting important visitors. Everyone seemed excited. Everyone except me. As I carried fresh blankets toward the guest quarters, 2 servant girls rushed past. "Did you hear?" one whispered. "The Northern Alpha arrived early. They say he's undefeated. They also say he can smell fear." The 2 laughed before disappearing around the corner. I lowered my eyes and continued walking. Powerful Alphas had never brought good news for Omegas. I had almost reached the guest wing when someone stepped directly into my path. Luna Vealora. Her expression alone made my heartbeat quicken. "Where have you been?" "I was gathering herbs with healer Melis." She narrowed her eyes. "You expect me to believe that?" "It's the truth." She stepped closer. "So you've learned to answer back." I wasn't. Before I could finish, she struck me across the face. The sharp sting burned against my cheek. The blankets slipped from my arms and scattered across the floor. Several nearby wolves stopped to watch. None of them moved. None of them spoke. Vealora looked down at me with cold satisfaction. "Pick them up." I knelt immediately. "I'm sorry." Louder. "I'm sorry, my Luna. You embarrassed me by disappearing." "I didn't mean to. Intentions don't matter." She turned toward the watching servants. "Remember this." She pointed at me. "This is what happens when an Omega forgets her place." Laughter spread through the courtyard. I lowered my head so no one would see the tears gathering in my eyes. Not because the slap hurt. Because no one cared that it had happened. After the crowd dispersed, I quietly gathered the blankets and finished my work. Hours later, I finally returned to the servants' quarters. My body ached. My cheek still burned. I sat on my narrow bed and stared at my hands. Why? Why did life have to be this way? Why was kindness always treated like weakness? A single tear rolled onto my palm. The moment it landed, a tiny silver spark flashed across my skin. I froze. The spark vanished. I rubbed my eyes. I must be exhausted. But another spark appeared. Then another. Soft silver lines spread across the back of my hand like glowing vines before disappearing beneath my skin. My breathing became uneven. This can't be real. Outside my window, the clouds slowly drifted away from the moon. Moonlight poured into my tiny room. The silver marks returned instantly. This time they stretched from my fingertips to my wrist. Warm. Gentle. Alive. I wasn't frightened anymore. I felt comforted. As though someone unseen had wrapped me in an embrace. Then I heard it. A voice. Soft as the wind. Ancient. My child. I jumped to my feet. Who's there? Silence answered. The voice came again. You have slept long enough. I rushed outside. The courtyard was empty. Everyone else was asleep. Only the full moon watched from above. My heart raced. Who's speaking to me? No answer came. Yet I knew I hadn't imagined it. Something had awakened. Someone, or something, was calling me. I looked toward the distant forest where the ancient stones rested beneath the trees. For the first time in my life, I felt as though the moon itself was waiting for me. And somewhere, hidden in the darkness beyond the forest, a pair of glowing silver eyes slowly opened. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the same gentle voice. My child. It wasn't frightening. It was comforting. Almost familiar. When dawn finally arrived, I sat upright on my narrow bed, hoping the strange events of the previous night had only been a dream. Then I looked down at my hands. The silver markings were gone. I let out a slow breath. Maybe I imagined everything. But the moment the first ray of sunlight touched my window, a faint warmth spread through my chest. It wasn't painful. It felt like a heartbeat that didn't belong to me. I pressed my palm against my chest. What are you? The bell in the courtyard rang before I could think any longer. The council had arrived. That meant the busiest day of the year had begun. I hurried into my gray servant's dress and rushed outside. The entire silver thorn pack had transformed overnight. Colorful banners hung from every building. Fresh flowers lined the stone pathways. Long wooden tables filled the great courtyard, waiting for honored guests from neighboring packs. Every servant was already running from one task to another. Neris. I turned to see Cook Bran waving impatiently. Stop standing there. I'm sorry. He shoved a heavy basket into my arms. Take these to the council hall. Right away. The basket was so heavy my arms trembled beneath its weight, but I forced myself forward. As I crossed the courtyard, I caught sight of wolves I had never seen before. Some wore crimson cloaks embroidered with golden wolves. Others carried polished weapons unlike anything in Silverthorn. The visiting alphas looked proud. Powerful. Untouchable. I kept my eyes lowered as I passed them. Servants weren't supposed to be noticed. Unfortunately, someone noticed me. There. The deep male voice stopped me in my tracks. I looked up just enough to see a broad-shouldered alpha studying me with curious eyes. His dark green cloak marked him as a leader from another territory. Unlike the others, he wasn't laughing. He simply watched me. You. My heart skipped. Yes. Alpha? What happened to your cheek? My fingers instinctively touched the fading bruise left by Luna Veilora. It was nothing. He frowned. It doesn't look like nothing. Before I could answer, another alpha laughed loudly. Leave the servant alone, Rowan. She's only an omega. The first alpha, Rowan, looked disappointed but said nothing more. I bowed quickly and continued walking. Still. His question lingered in my thoughts. No one had ever asked if I was hurt before. Not even once. The council meeting lasted most of the morning. Servants moved constantly between the kitchens and the great hall. I poured drinks. Collected empty plates. Refilled candles. Cleaned muddy footprints before anyone noticed them. By midday, every muscle in my body ached. As I carried another tray through the hallway, Luna Veilora stopped me. You. I immediately lowered my head. My Luna. The guests will gather in the moon courtyard tonight. Yes. You'll remain beside me. I blinked. Beside you? To serve. Of course. She stepped closer until I could smell the sharp perfume she always wore. And don't embarrass me again. I won't. You'd better not. She walked away without another word. I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Why did I have the feeling tonight would end badly? Evening arrived beneath the glow of the full moon. The moon courtyard looked breathtaking. Hundreds of crystal lanterns hung from ancient trees. Silver ribbons fluttered gently in the breeze. Musicians filled the air with soft melodies. The visiting alphas stood together discussing alliances while warriors demonstrated their strength before cheering crowds. I remained exactly where Luna Veilora had ordered. Silent. Invisible. Serving. Every time someone's cup emptied, I refilled it. Every time someone dropped a napkin, I picked it up. Hours passed. Then it happened. As I stepped between two tables carrying a silver tray filled with crystal goblets, one of the young warriors suddenly shoved another during a playful argument. The second warrior stumbled backward. Straight into me. The tray flew from my hands. Crystal shattered across the stone courtyard. Silence fell instantly. Every conversation stopped. I stared at the broken glass scattered around my feet. My heart sank. Oh no. The warrior who had bumped into me quickly stepped back. Before he could explain. Slap. Pain exploded across my face. Luna Veilora had struck me so hard I collapsed onto the broken glass. Sharp edges cut my palms. Gasps echoed around the courtyard. You clumsy fool, she shouted. You've ruined everything. My Luna. I whispered. I said stay out of the way. He bumped. Enough. She grabbed my arm and forced me to my knees in front of every alpha. Every warrior. Every servant. Since you enjoy making spectacles of yourself. Her voice rang across the silent courtyard. You will remain on your knees until every guest has left. My injured hands trembled against the cold stone. Blood slowly dripped from tiny cuts in my palms. Around me. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the visiting alphas watched in stunned silence. I lowered my head, fighting back tears. For one painful moment. I truly believed I was nothing. Then. A single drop of my blood slipped from my hand. It landed between the cracks of the ancient stone beneath my knees. The ground shivered. So slightly that only I seemed to notice. A strange warmth surged beneath my palms. The shattered pieces of crystal around me began to tremble. Far beyond the pack walls. Deep within the forgotten forest. The ancient stone circle burst into brilliant silver light. And beneath the oldest stone. Something that had slept for centuries. Awakened. The moment my blood touched the ancient stone beneath my knees, the entire courtyard trembled. At first, I thought no one else had noticed. Then the crystal goblets on the banquet tables began to rattle. The lanterns hanging from the ancient trees swayed violently even though there was no wind. Gasps echoed through the crowd. What was that? The ground moved. I looked down in confusion. The tiny drops of blood that had fallen from my injured hands were no longer red. They shimmered like liquid silver as they disappeared into the cracks of the ancient stone. A strange warmth rushed through my body. It began in my hands. Then my arms. Then my heart. I pressed my hand against my chest. What is happening to me? Far beyond the walls of Silver Thorn Pack, a deafening roar echoed through the forgotten forest. Every wolf turned toward the sound. The earth shook again. This time even stronger. From somewhere deep within the forest, a pillar of brilliant silver light shot into the night sky. Every face turned pale. Healer Melis whispered with tears filling her eyes. The stones. They've awakened. The council elders stared in horror. Impossible. They have slept for centuries. Luna Veilora grabbed my arms so tightly it hurt. What have you done? I don't know. Before she could speak again, another wave of power burst from beneath my feet. She was thrown backward. So was every warrior standing nearby. Only I remained standing in the center of the glowing courtyard. Silver light surrounded me like flowing mist. The markings I had seen on my hands spread across both arms, climbing toward my shoulders in beautiful glowing patterns. The warmth no longer frightened me. It felt like coming home. The moon above grew brighter. Brighter than anyone had ever seen. Then the clouds disappeared. Moonlight poured directly onto me. Not a single beam touched anyone else. Only me. Silence covered the courtyard. Then an ancient feminine voice echoed across the valley. Who dares chain the child chosen beneath my light? The voice was calm. Yet every word carried unimaginable power. Every wolf instinctively lowered their head. Luna Veilora looked around in panic. Who's speaking? No one answered. The voice came again. For years, she served without bitterness. Images suddenly appeared in the sky above us like reflections inside water. The entire pack watched in stunned silence. They saw me cleaning floors before sunrise. They saw me eating stale bread alone. They saw every slap. Every insult. Every humiliation. Exactly as they had happened. Several servants covered their mouths. Some warriors looked away in shame. Alpha Rowan clenched his fists. I didn't know. The voice continued. You measured her worth by her rank. I measured her heart. The glowing images vanished. No one could speak. Luna Veilora shook her head wildly. She's only an Omega. The moment those words left her mouth, the moonstone around her neck lost its light. A thin crack spread across its surface. She touched it in horror. My blessing. Healer Melis slowly stepped forward. The moon is withdrawing her favor. The council elders looked terrified. No Luna in history had ever lost the moon's blessing. Veilora pointed at me. This is her doing. It's witchcraft. One frightened warrior drew his sword. If she's cursed, we should end this now. Before he could take another step, the sword flew from his hand. No one had touched it. It simply lifted into the air before shattering into hundreds of silver sparks. The warrior stumbled backward. I didn't. I couldn't even hold it. A deep vibration rolled beneath the courtyard. Ancient symbols began appearing across the stone floor. They circled around me one after another, glowing brighter with every passing second. The elders dropped to their knees. The first seal. It truly exists. I stared at them. What seal? No one answered. Instead, every elder bowed their head. The silver light surrounding me rose higher until it formed enormous wings behind my back. Not wings of feathers. Wings of living moonlight. The wolves gasped. Some began crying. Others fell to their knees. Luna Veilora stood frozen, unable to look away. Then the ancient voice spoke one final time. The forgotten bloodline has awakened. At the next rising of the moon, the true guardian shall stand. The light exploded across the valley. Every lantern shattered. Every torch went out. Darkness swallowed the courtyard. For several long moments, No one could see anything. When the light finally faded, the glowing wings had disappeared. The markings on my skin had dimmed. I looked around in confusion. No one moved. No one spoke. Every wolf simply stared at me as though I were someone they had never seen before. Then one of the oldest council elders whispered words that made my blood run cold. "Find the sacred crown. Before the blood hunters find her first." A terrified howl echoed from the distant forest. Another answered it. Then another. Whatever had awakened tonight. It wasn't only the moon's ancient power. Someone else had sensed it. And they were already coming for me. I didn't sleep after the moon spoke. How could I? The elder's final words echoed through my mind over and over. Find the sacred crown, before the blood hunters find her first. Until that night, I had never heard of the blood hunters. Now I knew only one thing. They were coming for me. The pack that had ignored me for years no longer knew how to look at me. Some wolves stared with awe. Others stepped aside as I walked past. A few still looked at me with fear. Only one thing remained unchanged. I was still Neris. The same Omega who had once scrubbed their floors. Before sunrise, healer Melis hurried into the servants' quarters. "Neris," she whispered. "Come with me. Quickly." I followed her through a hidden path behind the healer's lodge until we reached the ancient forest. The stone circle glowed softly beneath the fading moon. "It wasn't glowing before," I said. "It has waited centuries for you," Melis replied. She led me to the largest stone. Resting on it was a silver circlet unlike anything I had ever seen. Moonstones shimmered across its surface, and delicate vines of silver wrapped around it as though they had grown naturally. "The sacred crown," Melis whispered. "My grandmother told me legends about it. I never believed they were real." I stared at it. "You want me to wear it? You were chosen long before you were born." With trembling hands, I lifted the crown. The instant it touched my head, silver light burst through the forest. Ancient symbols circled beneath my feet. A warm voice filled my heart. "Guardian, remember who you are." At once, memories that were not my own rushed through my mind. I saw generations of moon guardians protecting wolves from every pack. They settled disputes without bloodshed. They defended the weak against the powerful. They ruled with compassion instead of fear. Then I understood. The moon had never chosen the strongest wolf. She had always chosen the kindest. Tears filled my eyes. "So, this is why." Before Melis could answer, a chilling howl echoed through the forest. Another followed. Then another. Her face turned pale. "They're here." Dark figures emerged between the ancient trees. Each wore black armor marked with crimson symbols. Their leader stepped forward, carrying a massive spear. His scarred face twisted into a cruel smile. So the stories were true. The last guardian lives. Melis moved in front of me. "Run." The man laughed. "You still think she can hide?" He raised his spear. "The blood hunters have searched for centuries. We finish what our ancestors began." Warriors from Silverthorn Pack rushed into the forest led by Alpha Rowan. They formed a protective circle around me. "No one touches her." The blood hunter leader smiled. "We'll see." The battle began. Steel clashed against steel. Howls shook the forest. The blood hunters were fierce, but they fought with hatred. The wolves of Silverthorn fought to protect. I wanted to help, but fear rooted me to the ground. Then I remembered the moon's words. "Remember who you are." I closed my eyes. I don't want power for revenge. I want it to protect. Warmth flowed through every part of my body. When I opened my eyes, silver light spread from my hands across the forest floor. Flowers bloomed wherever the light touched. The wounded warriors gasped as their injuries began to heal. Broken weapons dissolved into harmless dust. The blood hunters stumbled backward. What is this? The leader charged toward me with his spear raised. I stood still. Not because I was helpless. Because I trusted the moon. Just before the spear reached me, a wall of brilliant moonlight appeared between us. The spear shattered instantly. The force threw the blood hunter leader to the ground. He stared at me in disbelief. This can't be. I walked toward him. He struggled to stand but couldn't. You've hunted innocent wolves for generations, I said quietly. It ends today. He lowered his head. The crimson symbol on his armor faded until nothing remained. One by one, the other blood hunters dropped their weapons. Without their hatred, they had no strength left to fight. The forest became silent once more. Morning sunlight filtered through the trees. Alpha Rowan approached me and knelt. Then every warrior followed. Even the council elders bowed. Luna Veilora stepped forward slowly. She looked nothing like the proud ruler who had once ordered me to scrub her floors. Her eyes were filled with regret. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I looked at the woman who had made my life miserable. For years, I had dreamed of this moment. I could have humiliated her. I could have taken everything from her. Instead, I remembered the frightened Omega I used to be. I forgive you, I said softly. Her eyes filled with tears. But Silverthorn needs a leader who serves its people. She nodded. I understand. She removed the Luna ceremonial cloak and placed it at my feet. I surrender my title. I gently picked it up and handed it to one of the council elders. I won't rule as a Luna. The elder looked surprised. What will you become? I smiled as the first rays of sunlight touched the ancient stones. I will be what the moon intended. A guardian. Months passed. Silverthorn became a different home. No Omega was forced to kneel. No servant ate alone. Young wolves trained their hearts before their claws. Strength was no longer measured by power. It was measured by compassion. Sometimes I return to the ancient stone circle where my destiny awakened. The wind still whispers through the trees. The moon still shines upon the sacred crown. And every time I stand there, I remember the frightened girl who believed she was born only to serve. She had no idea that the pack's greatest humiliation would become the beginning of its greatest hope. My name is Neris. I was forced to serve a Luna who believed kindness was weakness. But the night she tried to break me, the moon awakened the truth hidden in my soul. And I learned that true power does not come from ruling over others. It comes from lifting them up. That is how an unwanted Omega became the guardian every pack had been waiting for. And this time, no one would ever make another wolf believe they were worthless again.